The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in August of 1882, and when Helena Carlisle read the words through tear-blurred eyes, she made a decision that would change two lives forever. She would wear her dead sister's name to the altar and never lift her veil. The cattle ranch outside Montrose, Colorado, stretched across 3,000 acres of high desert country, where the Uncompahgre River cut through red rock canyons and sage-covered hills rolled toward distant mountains. Knox Mitchell stood on the porch of his ranch house, reading the letter for the third time, trying to imagine the woman who had written it. Her penmanship was elegant, her words carefully chosen, and she had answered every question in his advertisement with a thoughtfulness that made his chest tighten with something he had not felt in years. Hope, perhaps, or simply the possibility of not being alone anymore. He was 29 years old and tired of eating meals in silence, tired of waking in an empty bed, tired of building something with his own two hands and having no one to share it with. The ranch was prospering. His herd had grown from 200 head to nearly 800 in 5 years. He had built a proper house with 4 bedrooms, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, and a parlor with windows that faced the sunrise. But success tasted like ash when there was no one to celebrate it with. The woman who wrote to him called herself Helena Carlisle. She was 22 years old, educated at a finishing school in Philadelphia, and recently orphaned. Her parents had died of pneumonia within days of each other, leaving her with nothing but debts and the clothes in her trunk. She had no siblings, no close relatives, and no prospects. She wrote that she was plain but healthy, sensible but kind, and willing to travel west to become a rancher's wife if he proved to be an honest man. They had exchanged 4 letters over the course of 2 months. Knox had told her about the ranch, about the hard work and the isolation, about the beauty of the Colorado Territory and the harshness of its winters. He had told her he was looking for a partner, not a servant, someone who could ride beside him, not walk behind him. He wanted children someday, he wrote, but first he wanted friendship, respect, maybe even love, though he had not dared to write that word. Hannah's responses had been everything he hoped for. She wrote about books she had read, about her love of gardening, about her desire to be useful and needed. She wrote that she was not afraid of hard work or loneliness, and that she believed marriage was a covenant that required dedication and grace. In her final letter, she had agreed to come west and marry him, sight unseen, trusting in the character he had revealed through his words. The telegram that arrived that morning was brief. Arriving Montrose, August 19th. Stop. Will marry upon arrival. Stop. Helena Carlisle. Knox folded the telegram and tucked it into his shirt pocket. August 19th was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare his home and his heart for a woman he had never met. 3 days to wonder if he was making the biggest mistake of his life or the best decision he would ever make. He spent those 3 days in a frenzy of activity. He cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors and washing windows until his hands were raw. He rode into Montrose and bought new curtains for the bedroom, a set of fine china, and a bolt of blue calico fabric that he thought might make a nice dress. He bought coffee and sugar, flour and dried beans, and a jar of peach preserves that cost more than he wanted to spend. He bought a bottle of whiskey for himself and a bottle of rosewater for her. On the morning of August 19th, he dressed in his best clothes, a white shirt and black vest, dark trousers and polished boots. He shaved carefully and trimmed his hair, studying his reflection in the mirror and wondering what she would see when she looked at him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands. His face was angular, almost harsh, with a strong jaw and dark eyes that his mother had once called serious. He was not handsome, he knew, but he was not ugly either. He was simply a man who had spent his life working outdoors, and it showed in every weathered line and sun-squinted crease. The train arrived at 2 in the afternoon, belching steam and smoke as it ground to a halt at the Montrose depot. Knox stood on the platform with his hat in his hands, watching as passengers began to disembark, miners heading to the silver camps, merchants with trunks full of goods, families with children clinging to their skirts. And then, stepping down from the passenger car with careful grace, a woman in black. She wore a traveling dress of black bombazine, high-necked and long-sleeved despite the August heat. A black bonnet covered her hair, and a heavy black veil hung from the bonnet's brim, obscuring her face completely. She carried a small carpet bag in one gloved hand and moved with the stiff dignity of someone carrying a great burden. Knox felt his heart sink. Mourning clothes, of course. She had lost her parents only months ago. He should have expected this. But the veil unsettled him. It was not a thin veil of the sort that allowed a glimpse of features beneath. It was thick and heavy, the kind of veil that turned the wearer into a shadow, a silhouette, a mystery. He approached her slowly, his hat still clutched in his hands. "Miss Carlisle," she turned toward him, and though he could not see her face, he felt the weight of her gaze. "Mr. Mitchell." Her voice was soft, melodious, and trembling slightly. "Thank you for meeting me. Of course." He reached for her carpet bag, and she surrendered it without protest. "The wagon is just over here. I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she said simply, "but I am grateful to have arrived safely." They walked to the wagon in awkward silence. Knox helped her onto the seat, noticing how slight she was beneath the heavy mourning clothes, how her hands trembled as she arranged her skirts. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clucking to the horses. As they rolled through the streets of Montrose, Knox tried to find words. "The ranch is about an hour from town. It is a good piece of land. I think you will like it." "I am sure I will." Her voice was barely audible above the rattle of the wagon wheels. "I know this is not what you imagined," Knox continued, "meeting like this, marrying like this. But I promise you, Miss Carlisle, I am a man of my word. I will treat you with respect and kindness. I will provide for you and protect you, and I will never give you cause to regret your decision." She was silent for a long moment, and he wondered if he had said too much or not enough. Then she spoke, her voice steadier now. "I believe you, Mr. Mitchell. Your letters revealed your character more clearly than your face ever could. I am not afraid." They reached the edge of town, and Knox guided the horses onto the dirt road that wound through sage-covered hills toward his ranch. The August sun beat down mercilessly, and he noticed how the woman beside him seemed to sway slightly in her seat. "Are you well?" he asked, concern sharpening his voice. "The heat," she murmured, "and the veil. It makes it difficult to breathe sometimes." "Then take it off," Knox said immediately. "Please, you will make yourself ill." "No," the word was sharp, almost panicked. "I cannot, I must wear it," Knox frowned. "For how long?" "Until the wedding," she said. "Please do not ask me to remove it before then." He wanted to argue, to insist that she prioritize her health over propriety, but something in her voice stopped him. This was not about propriety. This was about something deeper, something that frightened her. So he nodded and said nothing more, letting the wagon carry them through the shimmering heat toward his ranch. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low hill. It was a sturdy structure of hewn logs and whitewashed planks, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Outbuildings dotted the property. A barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, a smokehouse, and a chicken coop. Beyond them, cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and the Uncompahgre River glinted silver in the distance. "It is beautiful," Helena whispered, and Knox felt a surge of pride. "It is home," he said simply. Or I hope it will be, for both of us. He helped her down from the wagon and carried her carpet bag into the house. The interior was cool and dim after the brightness outside. He had left the windows open to catch any breeze, and the smell of sage drifted through the rooms. "This is the parlor," Knox said, gesturing to the space with its simple furniture and braided rugs. "The kitchen is through there. Upstairs are the bedrooms. I thought you might want to rest before the ceremony." "The ceremony?" She turned toward him, and again he felt that invisible gaze. "The preacher is coming at 4, Knox explained. "I sent word when I received your telegram. I thought you would want to be married quickly, so we could begin our life together without delay." He hesitated. "Unless you need more time, I can send word and postpone it." "No." She shook her head and the veil swayed with the movement. "Today is fine, I am ready." Knox showed her to the largest bedroom upstairs. He had made the bed with fresh linens and placed a vase of wildflowers on the dresser. "Take as much time as you need," he said. "I will be downstairs when you are ready." He left her alone and descended to the parlor, pacing like a caged animal. His mind churned with questions. Why would she not remove the veil? Was she hideously disfigured, scarred by fire or disease? Or was it simply grief, a way of shielding herself from the world while she mourned her parents? He remembered her letters, the warmth and intelligence in her words, and he made a decision. Whatever her reasons, whatever lay beneath that veil, he would honor his commitment. He had not fallen in love with a face. He had fallen in love with words on a page, with the soul they revealed. The preacher arrived promptly at 4, a portly man named Reverend Samuels who ran the Methodist Church in Montrose. Knox's foreman, a grizzled cattleman named Jack Porter, came to serve as a witness, along with Jack's wife Martha, who had brought a cake and a bouquet of late summer roses. Helena descended the stairs as the clock struck the hour. She had changed into a different dress, still black but made of finer material, with lace at the collar and cuffs. The veil remained firmly in place. Reverend Samuels looked uncertain. "Miss Carlisle, it is customary for the bride to lift her veil during the ceremony, when the groom kisses his bride." "No," her voice was quiet but unyielding. "I will not lift my veil." The preacher glanced at Knox, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Mitchell, perhaps you should discuss this with your bride before we proceed." Knox stepped forward, moving to stand beside Helena. He could feel her trembling, could sense the fear radiating from her like heat. And in that moment, he understood that whatever lay beneath that veil was less important than the courage it had taken for her to come west, to stand here before strangers, to place her trust in a man she had never met. He turned to the preacher and spoke clearly, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "Reverend, I do not need to see my bride's face to know I want to marry her. I fell in love with her heart, not her appearance. If she wishes to keep the veil on, then she will keep it on. Now and forever, if that is her choice." Helena made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Her hand reached out blindly and Knox caught it, holding it gently in his own. Her fingers were small and cold and he squeezed them reassuringly. The preacher sighed but nodded. "Very well. Let us begin." The ceremony was brief and simple. They stood before the window that faced the sunset, and Reverend Samuels spoke the ancient words that bound one life to another. Knox repeated his vows in a steady voice, promising to love and cherish, to honor and protect in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, until death parted them. Helena's voice shook as she made her vows, but she did not falter. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Knox lifted the veil just enough to glimpse the curve of a chin, the suggestion of lips, and he pressed a gentle kiss to the fabric that covered her mouth. It was not the kiss he had imagined, but it felt sacred nonetheless. Martha Porter wept and embraced Helena. Jack shook Knox's hand and muttered something about brave men and foolish choices, but his eyes were kind. The preacher accepted his payment and departed with a blessing, and the porters followed soon after, leaving the newlyweds alone in the gathering darkness. Knox lit lamps throughout the house, chasing away the shadows. Helena stood in the parlor, her hands clasped before her, silent and still as a statue. "Are you hungry?" Knox asked. "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage bacon and eggs, or there is bread and cheese and Martha brought that cake. I am not hungry." Her voice was barely a whisper. "But thank you." Knox rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly uncertain. "Helena, I want you to know that I meant what I said about the veil. You do not have to remove it for my sake. Not now, not ever. And tonight you will sleep alone in the bedroom upstairs. I will sleep down here on the sofa. We have all the time in the world to become husband and wife in truth. There is no rush." She turned toward him then, and though he still could not see her face, he felt something shift between them. "You would do that, sleep apart from me on our wedding night." "I would do whatever makes you comfortable," Knox said simply. "This is your home now, Helena. You should feel safe here." She was silent for a long moment, and then she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are kinder than I deserve." Before he could respond, she turned and climbed the stairs, her black dress rustling in the quiet. Knox heard the bedroom door close, and he sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands, wondering what kind of marriage he had just entered. The days that followed established a strange but oddly comfortable rhythm. Helena rose early each morning, dressed always in black with her veil firmly in place, and came downstairs to help prepare breakfast. She was a good cook, Knox discovered, better than he had any right to expect. She made biscuits that were light and fluffy, eggs scrambled with herbs from the kitchen garden, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, and Knox told her about the work that needed doing that day, which pastures the cattle were grazing, which fences needed mending, what supplies needed to be ordered from town. Helena listened attentively and asked thoughtful questions, and gradually Knox began to forget about the veil, seeing past it to the woman beneath. After breakfast, Knox would ride out to work the ranch while Helena tended to the house. She cleaned and cooked and sewed, and she planted a garden in the patch of ground behind the kitchen. She had a gift for growing things, he realized. Within weeks, the garden was flourishing with vegetables and herbs, and she had started a flower bed near the porch in the evenings. They sat together in the parlor. Sometimes Knox read aloud from the newspaper or from books he had ordered from Denver. Sometimes Helena played the old piano that had belonged to his mother, her fingers moving over the keys with practiced grace. Sometimes they simply talked, sharing stories from their lives before they met. Knox learned that Helena loved Shakespeare and could recite entire sonnets from memory. She had studied music and painting, though she claimed no great talent in either. She missed Philadelphia sometimes, missed the theaters and museums, but she did not regret coming west. Helena learned that Knox had been raised on a smaller ranch in Wyoming, that his father had died when he was 16, and that he had come to Colorado to build something of his own. He loved the land with a fierce devotion, but he was not blind to its harshness. He had survived blizzards and droughts, lost cattle to disease and predators, and he bore the scars of a life lived hard. They grew comfortable with each other in a way that surprised them both. Knox found himself watching for Helena in the mornings, eager to see her moving about the kitchen. Helena found herself listening for the sound of Knox's boots on the porch at the end of the day, her heart lifting when he walked through the door. But the veil remained. Knox never asked about it, and Helena never offered an explanation. It hung between them like a curtain, a mystery that could not be ignored even when they pretended it did not exist. 6 weeks after their wedding, Knox came home to find Helena in the garden, her hands covered in dirt, her veil pinned back slightly so she could see better as she worked. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment he caught a glimpse of a pale throat, the curve of a jaw, before she quickly adjusted the veil to cover herself completely. "The tomatoes are coming in well," she said, her voice bright and false. "I thought I might make a stew tonight." Knox dismounted and stood watching her, his heart aching with something he could not name. "Helena," he said quietly, "why do you still wear the veil?" She froze, her hands stilling in the dirt. "You said I did not have to remove it, and I meant it," Knox said quickly. "But I confess I do not understand. We are married. We live together, eat together, share our lives together. Yet you hide yourself from me as if I am a stranger. Have I done something to make you fear me?" "No." She shook her head vehemently. "No, Knox, you have been nothing but kind and patient. This is not about you." "Then what is it about?" He took a step closer, careful not to crowd her. "Are you disfigured, scarred? Helena, if that is what you fear, know that it would not matter to me. I have seen men with half their faces blown off by dynamite, women scarred by fire and disease. Such things do not repel me. I am not scarred." Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "Then why?" Knox heard the frustration in his own voice and tried to soften it. "Helena, please help me understand." She stood slowly, brushing the dirt from her hands. When she spoke, her voice was thick with unshed tears. "Because I am not who you think I am." Knox felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean?" "My name is not Helena Carlisle." The words came out in a rush, as if she had been holding them back for so long that they could no longer be contained. "Hannah was my sister, my older sister. She was the one who answered your advertisement. She was the one who wrote those letters, and she was the one who was supposed to marry you." Knox stood very still, trying to make sense of her words. She died. Helena's voice broke on the word. 2 weeks before she was supposed to board the train to come here. There was an accident. A carriage overturned. She was killed instantly. Knox felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "Then who are you?" "My name is Helena. Helena Carlisle. I am Hannah's younger sister." She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold herself together. "I lied to you. I deceived you. I came here under her name, using her ticket, carrying her letters. I let you marry me thinking I was her." "Why?" The word came out hoarse. "Why would you do such a thing?" "Because I had nowhere else to go." The confession seemed to tear itself from her throat. "After Mama and Papa died, Hannah was all I had. We were going to face the debts together, find work together. But then she received your letters and she saw a way out for at least one of us. She was going to send for me once she was settled, once she had earned your trust. But then she died and I was alone with nothing. The landlord was threatening to turn me out. The creditors were circling. I had no money, no prospects, no family. So I took Hannah's ticket and her name, and I came west pretending to be her." Knox turned away, his mind reeling. "The veil. You wore the veil so I would not see that you were not the woman in the photograph she sent." "She never sent a photograph," Helena said quickly. "She told you she had none, remember? That was true. But I wore the veil because I was terrified. Terrified you would see through the deception, that you would realize I was not Hannah. Hannah was beautiful, Knox. She had golden hair and blue eyes and a face like an angel. I am plain and dark, nothing like her. If you saw me, you would know I was not the woman who wrote those letters." Knox tried to remember the letters, tried to recall if there had been any physical description. Hannah had said she was plain, he remembered that. But she had not described herself beyond that. He had filled in the blanks with his imagination, creating an image that bore no resemblance to reality. "Did you write any of the letters?" he asked. "Or were they all Hannah's?" "The first 3 were Hannah's," Helena admitted. The last one, the one accepting your proposal, I wrote that. I tried to match her handwriting, her style. I wanted you to believe it was her." Knox closed his eyes, struggling to contain the storm of emotions roiling inside him. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and beneath it all something else. Something that felt dangerously like relief. "So for 6 weeks you have been living a lie," he said slowly, "pretending to be someone you are not." "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "I am sorry, Knox. I know I should have told you from the beginning, but I was afraid. Afraid you would send me away. Afraid I would end up on the streets with nothing." "And now," Knox opened his eyes and turned to face her. "Why tell me now? Because I cannot bear it any more." Helena's voice cracked and tears soaked into the veil. "Because you deserve the truth. Because you have been so kind and patient and good, and I have repaid you with lies. I know you will probably send me away now, and you have every right to do so. I will understand. But I wanted you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to survive." Knox stared at the veiled figure before him, trying to reconcile what he had believed with what he now knew. The woman he had married was not Helena Carlisle. She was Helena Carlisle, a stranger who had stolen her dead sister's identity and tricked him into marriage. He should be furious. He should feel betrayed, used, deceived. And he did feel all those things. But he also felt something else, something that made no sense given the circumstances. He still wanted her, not Hannah, the woman who had written those first letters. But Helena, the woman who had cooked his meals and tended his garden and played piano in the evenings. Helena, who had asked thoughtful questions about his ranch and laughed at his clumsy jokes and made him feel less alone than he had felt in years. "Take off the veil," he said quietly. "What?" "Take it off. If we are going to have this conversation, I want to see your face. Knox, please, I told you I am not beautiful like Hannah. I am plain and dark and nothing special. I do not care." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You said you cannot bear the lies anymore. Then let us have truth between us. All of it. Take off the veil, Helena." Her hands trembled as they reached up to the pins that held the veil in place. She removed them one by one, letting them fall to the ground, and then slowly, carefully, she lifted the heavy black fabric away from her face. Knox had braced himself for anything. For a face marked by pox or scarred by burns. For features too plain or too harsh. For anything except what he saw. Helena Carlisle was not beautiful in the conventional sense. She did not have golden hair or blue eyes or the delicate features her sister apparently possessed. Her hair was dark brown, almost black, pulled back in a simple bun. Her eyes were brown, large and expressive, framed by thick lashes. Her skin was pale, dusted with freckles across her nose and cheeks. Her face was angular with high cheekbones and a strong chin, and her mouth was wide and expressive. She was not beautiful, but she was striking, arresting, real in a way that made Knox's chest tighten with an emotion he could not quite name. "Well," Helena's voice wavered, "now you see, I am nothing like Hannah." "No," Knox agreed slowly, "you are not." Her face crumpled and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am sorry. I know you must be so disappointed. You wanted Hannah and you got me instead." Knox took a step forward, then another, until he was standing directly in front of her. He reached out and gently caught one of her tears on his thumb, marveling at how real she suddenly seemed now that he could see her face. "Helena," he said softly, "I am not disappointed." She looked up at him, confusion written across her features. "You are not." "I am angry that you lied to me," Knox said honestly. "I am confused and hurt that you thought deception was necessary, but disappointed in your appearance. No, never that. But Hannah was beautiful and I am not. You are beautiful to me." The words came out before Knox could stop them, but once they were spoken, he realized they were true. Maybe not in the way your sister was, but in your own way. And more than that, you are kind, hardworking, brave enough to travel 1,000 miles alone to make a new life. Those things matter more to me than a pretty face ever could. Helena stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. You truly mean that? I do. Knox hesitated, then continued. Helena, you say you are not Hannah, that you deceived me by taking her place. But here is the truth. I never knew Hannah. I knew words on a page, letters written by someone I had never met. And maybe some of those words were hers and some were yours, but the woman I have come to care for these past 6 weeks is you, not some imaginary version of Hannah. You. The woman who makes biscuits every morning and hums while she gardens and plays Chopin in the evenings. That is who I married, whether I knew it or not, and I do not want to lose her. Helena's tears flowed freely now, streaming down her face unchecked. You would forgive me. Even after I lied to you, I am trying to, Knox said honestly. It will take time and we will need to rebuild trust. But yes, I want to try, if you want to stay. Stay. Helena looked around at the ranch, the house, the land spreading out in all directions. You would let me stay. This is your home, Helena. You are my wife, not Hannah. You, and if you are willing, I would like us to start over. No more lies, no more secrets, just truth between us. Helena let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I do not deserve you, maybe not, Knox said with a small smile. But you are stuck with me now. She surprised him by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. Knox held her carefully, feeling her body shake with sobs, and he realized that this was the first time they had truly touched. The first time he had held his wife in his arms. Thank you, Helena whispered against his shirt. Thank you for being the man you are. Knox rested his chin on top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, and felt something settle inside him. This was not the marriage he had imagined. But it was real, and it was his, and he would fight to make it work. They stood together in the garden as the sun set behind the mountains. Two people who had found each other through deception and desperation, but who were choosing to stay together through honesty and hope. In the days and weeks that followed, Knox and Helena began the slow process of building a real marriage. The veil disappeared, packed away in a trunk in the bedroom, and Helena moved through the house with her face uncovered. Knox found himself watching her constantly, memorizing the way her expressions changed, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the way her brow furrowed when she was concentrating. She was still shy around him, still uncertain of her place in his life, but gradually her confidence grew. She began to offer opinions about the ranch, suggesting improvements to the chicken coop and better organization for the root cellar. She started riding out with Knox some mornings, learning to handle a horse with increasing skill, and she proved to have a good eye for cattle. Knox, for his part, made an effort to include her in every aspect of ranch life. He explained the business side of ranching, showing her the account books and discussing his plans for expansion. He taught her to shoot, patiently correcting her aim until she could hit a target at 50 yards. He introduced her to the ranch hands, making it clear that she was not just the boss's wife but a partner in the enterprise. One October morning, nearly 2 months after Helena had revealed the truth, Knox found her in the barn helping one of the ranch hands deliver a calf. She was covered in blood and sweat, her hair falling out of its pins, but her eyes were shining with triumph as the calf took its first wobbly steps. "You did good, Mrs. Mitchell," the ranch hand said with genuine respect. "That was a hard birth, but you stayed calm." Helena beamed at the praise, and Knox felt his heart swell with pride. This woman, who had arrived on his doorstep in mourning clothes and a veil, who had been terrified and desperate and lost, was transforming before his eyes into someone confident and capable. That evening, after they had both washed and changed, they sat together on the porch watching the stars emerge. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and Knox had wrapped a blanket around Helena's shoulders to keep her warm. "I want to tell you something," Helena said suddenly, her voice quiet in the darkness. Knox turned to look at her, seeing the starlight reflected in her eyes. "What is it?" "When I answered your advertisement, I was desperate," she began. "I was taking Hannah's place because I had no other choice. I did not think about what it would mean to be married, to share a life with someone. I just wanted safety and security." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But somewhere along the way that changed. I stopped thinking of this as just a means of survival. I started thinking of it as a life I wanted, a life I chose, and I started thinking of you not as the man who gave me shelter, but as the man I want to spend my life with." Knox felt his breath catch. "Helena, I am saying this badly," she said with a small, nervous laugh. "What I mean is, I think I am falling in love with you, Knox Mitchell. Not because you saved me or because you were kind when you had every right to be cruel, but because you are you, because you make me laugh, because you see me, really see me, and you still choose to be with me. Because when I imagine my future, you are in every part of it." Knox reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I am falling in love with you too," he said simply. "Maybe I started falling the day you stepped off that train in your black dress and your veil. Or maybe it was the first morning you made biscuits, or the first time I heard you play the piano. I do not know when it happened, only that it did. You are my wife, Helena, in every way that matters." She turned toward him, her face luminous in the starlight. "Then can I truly be your wife? Not just in name, but in deed?" Knox understood what she was asking. For 2 months they had slept apart, him on the sofa downstairs, her in the bedroom above. It had been necessary at first, giving her space and time to feel safe. But now, looking at her upturned face, seeing the love and trust in her eyes, Knox knew that time had passed. "Are you sure?" he asked, needing to hear her say it clearly. "I am sure," Helena said. "I want to be your wife in every way. I want to share your bed and your life and build a future with you, if you want that too." "I do," Knox said, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me, Helena, I want that more than anything." He stood and pulled her to her feet, the blanket falling away forgotten. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, really kissed her, for the first time since their wedding day. Her lips were soft and warm, and she responded with a hesitant eagerness that made his heart race. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Knox rested his forehead against hers. "Come to bed with me," he whispered. "Let me show you how much I love you." She nodded, unable to speak, and took his hand. Together they walked into the house and up the stairs to the bedroom that would finally become theirs to share. That night, in the darkness and the warmth of each other's arms, Knox and Helena became husband and wife in truth. It was tender and awkward and wonderful, a joining of two people who had found each other through unusual circumstances, but who chose to stay together through love. Afterward, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Helena traced patterns on Knox's chest with her fingertips. "I never thought I could be this happy," she murmured. "After Hannah died, after I lost everything, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone and afraid. But you gave me a home, Knox. More than that, you gave me yourself." Knox kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "You gave me something too. I built this ranch with my own hands, made it successful through hard work and determination. But it felt empty, like I was building something that did not matter because there was no one to share it with. You filled that emptiness, Helena. You made this place feel like a home instead of just a house." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time since coming to Colorado, Knox did not wake in the middle of the night feeling alone. The winter that followed was harsh, as Colorado winters often were. Snow piled high against the house, and the wind howled down from the mountains like a living thing. But inside the ranch house, warmth and love flourished. Knox taught Helena to play chess, and they spent long evenings locked in strategic battles while the fire crackled in the hearth. Helena taught Knox to dance, humming melodies as she guided him through the steps of waltzes and polkas. They read books together, taking turns reading aloud, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing. In January, Knox received a letter from a lawyer in Philadelphia. It seemed that Helena's parents' debts had been settled by the sale of their house and possessions, and there was a small amount of money remaining. Not much, but enough to be meaningful. The lawyer wanted to know where to send the funds. Knox showed Helena the letter, watching as emotions played across her face: surprise, relief, sadness. "I thought there would be nothing left," she said quietly. "I thought they had lost everything." "It is not a fortune," Knox said, "but it is something. What do you want to do with it?" Helena thought for a long moment, then said, "I want to use it to buy a headstone for Hannah. She is buried in Philadelphia, but she never had a proper marker. I want people to know she was there, that she mattered." Knox pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed by her generosity. Even after everything her sister had meant to do, even though Helena had taken her place, she still loved her and wanted to honor her memory. "We will do that," he promised, "and anything left over we will save for our children." Helena looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Our children." "Someday," Knox said with a smile, "when you are ready. I would like to have children with you, Helena, if you want that too." "I do," she whispered. "I want that very much." Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the landscape overnight. Wildflowers bloomed across the hills, the river ran high with snowmelt, and the cattle grew fat on new grass. Helena's garden burst into life, and she spent hours each day tending it, her hands always dirty, her face always smiling. In May, Knox noticed changes in Helena. She was tired more often, needing to rest in the afternoons. She turned pale at the smell of cooking meat, and she began to fill out slightly, her dresses growing tighter across her middle. One evening, as they sat together after supper, Knox finally asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Helena, are you with child?" She looked up at him, and the joy in her face was answer enough. "I think so. I'm not certain yet, but all the signs are there." Knox felt a wave of emotion so intense it nearly knocked him off his feet. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Helena asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know it is soon. We have only been truly married for a few months." "Happy." Knox laughed and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. "I am beyond happy. I am overjoyed. I am the luckiest man alive." He set her down carefully, suddenly worried about being too rough. Helena laughed at his concern and took his hands, placing them on her still flat belly. "Our baby is in there," she said softly. "Growing, becoming." Knox felt tears prick his eyes. "I love you," he said fiercely. "I love you so much, Helena. I love you too," she whispered back. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Knox fretted constantly. He insisted Helena rest more, do less heavy work, eat the most nutritious food. Helena bore his worrying with amused patience, assuring him that she was strong and healthy and perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. In June, Martha Porter came to visit and confirmed what they already knew. Helena was indeed pregnant, probably due in late January or early February. Martha promised to be there for the birth, and she began teaching Helena what to expect and how to prepare. As summer ripened into autumn, Helena's belly grew round and full. Knox found himself mesmerized by the changes in her body, the way she glowed with health and happiness, the way she would pause sometimes and press a hand to her stomach with a look of wonder. "The baby is moving," she told him one evening, grabbing his hand and placing it on her belly. "Can you feel it?" Knox held very still, and then he felt it, a flutter like a butterfly trapped beneath his palm. His child moving and alive. Tears streamed down his face, and he did not bother to wipe them away. "Hello, little one," he whispered to Helena's belly. "We cannot wait to meet you." As fall turned to winter and the first snows began to fall, Knox made preparations for the birth. He stocked the house with extra supplies, made sure there was plenty of wood for the fire, and sent word to Martha Porter that she should be ready to come at a moment's notice. Helena remained calm and cheerful, even as her body grew unwieldy and uncomfortable. She waddled more than walked now, and getting up from a chair required assistance, but she never complained. Instead, she spent her time sewing tiny clothes and knitting blankets, humming softly as she worked. On a cold January night, when the wind rattled the windows and snow fell thick and heavy, Helena's labor began. Knox sent one of the ranch hands racing to fetch Martha, and then he did his best to keep Helena comfortable and calm, even though he felt anything but calm himself. Martha arrived within an hour, snow-covered and breathless, and she took charge immediately. She sent Knox out of the room, telling him that babies were women's work and he would only be in the way. Knox paced the parlor for hours, listening to the sounds coming from upstairs. Helena's cries of pain tore at his heart, and more than once he started up the stairs, only to be turned back by Martha's stern voice. Finally, just as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Knox heard a new sound, the thin, reedy wail of a newborn baby. He took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Martha holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. "You have a son," Martha announced with a smile. "A healthy, strong boy." Knox barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on Helena, who lay propped against pillows, pale and exhausted but smiling. "Helena," he breathed, moving to her side. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she assured him, though her voice was weak. "Look at him, Knox. Look at our son." Martha placed the baby in Helena's arms, and Knox got his first real look at his child. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look everywhere at once. He was the most beautiful thing Knox had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" Knox asked, his voice choked with emotion. Helena nodded and carefully transferred the baby into Knox's arms. The infant was so small, so light, yet he seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. Knox looked down at his son and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Helena asked. Knox thought for a moment, then said, "What about Henry, after your father?" Helena's eyes filled with tears. "And his middle name should be James, after yours." "Henry James Mitchell," Knox said, trying out the name. "Welcome to the world, son." The baby made a small sound and waved one tiny fist, and Knox laughed through his tears. He sat on the edge of the bed and showed Henry to Helena, and together they marveled at the miracle they had created. Martha stayed for a week, helping Helena recover and teaching both new parents how to care for an infant. Knox proved to be a surprisingly adept father, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with Henry when the baby fussed at night. "You are a natural," Helena told him one evening, watching as he rocked Henry to sleep. "I think you love being a father even more than you love ranching." "I love both," Knox admitted. "But yes, this little fellow has stolen my heart completely." As winter slowly gave way to spring, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Henry grew and thrived, a happy, healthy baby who seemed to find wonder in everything. Helena regained her strength and returned to her normal activities, though now she often had Henry strapped to her back in a sling as she worked. Knox hired additional ranch hands so he could spend more time at the house, unwilling to miss a moment of his son's development. He was there when Henry smiled for the first time, there when he learned to roll over, there for every milestone, no matter how small. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with Henry asleep in Knox's arms, Helena said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is it?" Knox asked, glancing over at her. "I want to tell you about Hannah," Helena said. "Really tell you about her, not just that she was beautiful and that I took her place. I want you to know who she was, what she meant to me. I think I need to stop hiding from her memory." Knox nodded. "I would like that." So Helena talked, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. She told Knox about growing up with Hannah, about how her sister had been her best friend and protector. Hannah had been 4 years older, old enough to be more like a second mother than a sibling after their mother grew ill. Hannah had been everything Helena was not: beautiful, charming, graceful. But she had never made Helena feel less than, never treated her with anything but love and kindness. When their parents died, Hannah had been determined to take care of her younger sister, even if it meant marrying a stranger and traveling west. She was brave, Helena said, tears streaming down her face. "Braver than I ever was. She would have been a good wife to you, Knox." "Probably better than I am." "No," Knox said firmly. "Different maybe, but not better. Helena, I am sorry your sister died. I am sorry you lost her, but I cannot be sorry that you came to me instead. Does that make me a terrible person?" "No," Helena said, reaching over to take his hand. "It makes you human. And I am not sorry either. I miss Hannah every day, and I wish she could have lived to see Henry, to know the life we have built here. But I cannot regret the choices that brought me to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. Finally, Helena spoke again. "I want to name our next daughter after her. When the time comes, I want to name her Hannah." Knox squeezed her hand. "I think that would be perfect." The years that followed were full and rich. Henry grew into a curious, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere and adored his mother with fierce devotion. When he was 3 years old, Helena gave birth to a daughter, and they named her Hannah Grace Mitchell. Little Hannah had her father's dark eyes and her mother's delicate features, and she was as sweet-tempered as her brother was boisterous. Knox found himself wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. 2 years after Hannah came another son, whom they named Samuel after Knox's father. And 3 years after Samuel came another daughter, Emily. The ranch house that had once seemed too large now felt just right, filled with the noise and chaos of 4 children. Knox expanded the ranch operations, buying more land and increasing the herd. Helena started a small business selling eggs and vegetables to the growing town of Montrose, and she became known for her skill with difficult childbirths, often riding out to help other women in labor. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Knox would sometimes stand on the porch and watch Helena in the garden with the children playing around her, and he would marvel at how different his life had turned out from what he had imagined. He had set out to find a mail-order bride, a practical arrangement to ease his loneliness. Instead, he had found love in the most unexpected way. A woman who had come to him under false pretenses, wearing a veil to hide her identity, had become the center of his entire world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Knox took Helena into town and bought her a new dress, blue calico like the fabric he had purchased before their wedding. They left the children with Martha Porter and had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury. As they walked back to the wagon afterward, Helena slipped her arm through Knox's and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Marrying me when you thought I was someone else?" Knox stopped walking and turned to face her, cupping her face in his calloused hands. "Never," he said fiercely. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Mitchell. You and our children are my whole world. Even though I deceived you, even though I lied about who I was." "You were desperate and frightened," Knox said gently. "And yes, you lied. But you also told me the truth when you did not have to. You could have kept wearing that veil forever and I would have accepted it. But you chose honesty. You chose to trust me with the truth. That took courage." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "I love you so much. More than I have words to express." "I love you too," Knox said, kissing her softly. "My heart, my home, my everything." They stood together in the quiet street, holding each other close, two people who had found love in the most unlikely way and built a life that exceeded all their dreams. When they returned home that night, the house was full of noise and laughter. Henry was demonstrating a rope trick for his younger siblings while Martha tried to restore order. Knox paid Martha and thanked her, then helped Helena get the children ready for bed. Later, after all four children were finally asleep, Knox and Helena sat together in their bedroom. Helena was brushing out her hair, and Knox was watching her with contentment settling over him like a warm blanket. "You remember the day we met?" Helena asked, glancing at him in the mirror. "Of course," Knox said. "You stepped off that train in your black dress and that veil, and I thought you were a mystery I would never solve. And now I know you better than I know myself," Knox said, "and I fall more in love with you every day." Helena set down her brush and turned to face him. "I was so frightened that day, terrified you would see through my deception, that you would send me away. I never imagined that wearing that veil would lead to this." "To what?" "To you saying those words on our wedding day. That you married my heart, not my face." Helena's voice was thick with emotion. "No one had ever said anything like that to me before. No one had ever looked past the surface to see who I really was inside. But you did. Even when I was hiding behind that veil, you saw me." Knox rose and crossed to her, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "I saw you because you let me see you. Through your actions, your words, your kindness. The veil did not matter because I was not looking for a face. I was looking for a heart that matched mine, and I found it." They held each other in the quiet darkness, surrounded by the life they had built together. And Knox knew that despite all the unexpected twists and turns, he would not change a single moment of their story. The veiled bride who had stepped off that train 10 years ago had become the center of his world, and he was grateful every day for the deception that had brought them together and the truth that had bound them for life. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. Henry, at 17, was tall and strong, working alongside his father and learning everything Knox could teach him about managing the ranch. Young Hannah, at 14, had her mother's grace and her namesake's beauty, though Helena assured Knox she had her own unique spirit. Samuel, at 12, was quiet and studious, more interested in books than cattle, and Knox encouraged his education, knowing the world was changing and his children would need different skills than he had. Emily, the baby at 9, was fearless and wild, more comfortable on horseback than anywhere else. The ranch had grown substantially over the years. Knox now employed 15 ranch hands year-round, and the herd had grown to over 2,000 head of cattle. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, disease outbreaks and market fluctuations, but through it all, Knox and Helena had remained a united team. In the spring of 1892, when Knox was 40 and Helena was 32, they received an unexpected visitor. A young woman arrived by train from Philadelphia, carrying a letter of introduction and a request that left them both stunned. Her name was Margaret Weston, and she was the daughter of the lawyer who had handled Helena's parents' estate years before. She explained that while going through old files, she had come across Helena Carlisle's correspondence with Knox Mitchell, and she had become intrigued by the story. "I did some research," Margaret explained as they sat in the parlor drinking tea. "I learned that Helena Carlisle had died in a carriage accident, but that her sister Helena had traveled west and married you, Mr. Mitchell. I wanted to know what had happened, whether the story had a happy ending or a tragic one." Knox and Helena exchanged glances, and Helena said, "It had a happy ending, the happiest possible." Margaret smiled. "I am so glad to hear that, but I have come for another reason as well. I am a writer and I would like to tell your story. Changed names, of course, to protect your privacy. But I think it is a story that deserves to be told. A story about love and deception, truth and forgiveness, and finding happiness in unexpected places." Knox frowned. "I am not sure I want our private life made public. Please consider it," Margaret urged. "Your story could give hope to so many people. Women who feel trapped by circumstance. Men who are looking for something real in a world that often feels false. Young people trying to figure out what love really means. Your story has power." Helena was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "Let me think about it. Can you stay in Montrose for a few days? I would like to discuss this with my husband." Margaret agreed and took a room at the hotel in town. That evening, as Knox and Helena prepared for bed, they talked about the request. "Part of me wants to say no," Knox admitted. "What we have is ours. It feels wrong to share it with the world." "I understand that," Helena said, "but I keep thinking about the girl I was when I stepped off that train, desperate, frightened, willing to do anything to survive. What if our story could help someone like that? Show them that even when things seem hopeless, there can be a way forward," Knox sighed. "When you put it like that, how can I say no?" Helena smiled and kissed him. "We do not have to decide tonight. Let us sleep on it." But in the morning, they both knew what they wanted to do. They invited Margaret back to the ranch and told her she could write their story with a few conditions. Names would be changed. Certain private details would remain private. And they would have approval over the final manuscript before it was published. Margaret agreed eagerly and spent the next 2 weeks interviewing them both, taking careful notes and asking thoughtful questions. She spoke to their children, to Martha Porter, to the ranch hands who had worked for them for years. She walked the property and took photographs, capturing the landscape that had become the backdrop of their love story. When she finally returned to Philadelphia with her notebooks full of material, Knox and Helena felt strangely exposed, as if they had opened a window into their souls. "You think we made the right decision?" Helena asked Knox one evening. "I do not know," Knox said honestly. "But I think we made the decision that felt true to who we are. We have never hidden from the truth, even when it was difficult. Why start now?" 6 months later, a package arrived containing a manuscript. Knox and Helena read it together, sitting side by side in the parlor, and they were amazed by what Margaret had created. She had captured their story with sensitivity and grace, emphasizing the love and the growth while handling the deception with understanding rather than judgment. "She made us sound heroic," Helena said with wonder, "but we were just 2 people trying to survive and find happiness." "Maybe that is what makes it heroic," Knox suggested. "Not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but the daily choice to love and trust and forgive." They approved the manuscript with only minor changes, and a year later, Margaret sent them a published copy of the book. It was called The Veiled Bride, and it became a modest success, popular among women in eastern cities who dreamed of adventure and romance in the West. The book brought some notoriety to Montrose, with curious visitors occasionally asking about the real people behind the story. But Knox and Helena had requested anonymity, and Margaret had honored that request, so few people connected the fictional characters to the Mitchell family. Life continued its steady pace. Henry married a neighboring rancher's daughter when he was 21, and Knox began teaching him the business side of running the ranch, preparing to pass it on to the next generation. Young Hannah became a teacher at the Montrose School, beloved by her students for her patience and creativity. Samuel left for college in Denver, determined to become a doctor. And Emily, true to her wild nature, announced she wanted to learn to train horses professionally. Knox and Helena watched their children grow and find their own paths, and they marveled at how quickly time had passed. It seemed like only yesterday that Helena had stepped off that train in her mourning clothes, and now their oldest son was married and talking about starting a family of his own. On a warm evening in June of 1897, Knox and Helena celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party at the ranch, inviting neighbors and friends from town. There was food and music and dancing, and Knox spent the evening watching Helena move through the crowd, greeting guests and laughing with friends, still as striking and beautiful to him as she had been the day she revealed her face. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had departed, Knox led Helena to the garden she had planted so many years ago. It had grown and expanded over the years, now covering a large section of ground behind the house, filled with flowers and vegetables and fruit trees. "Do you remember the day I found you here?" Knox asked. "When you told me the truth about who you were, of course," Helena said. "I thought my world was ending. I thought you would send me away. And instead, you showed me what true love looks like," Helena said softly. "Not the fairy tale kind, all grand gestures and perfect moments, but the real kind, the kind that chooses to stay when leaving would be easier, the kind that forgives when resentment would be justified, the kind that sees the worst parts of someone and loves them anyway." Knox pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "You taught me about love too. You taught me that it is not about finding someone perfect, but about choosing to love someone imperfect. You came to me wearing a veil, hiding who you really were, but you gave me the courage to remove my own veils, to be vulnerable, to risk my heart." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by the plants that Helena had coaxed from the earth, and Knox thought about everything they had built together. A ranch, a family, a life full of love and purpose and meaning. "I would do it all again," Helena said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "Every difficult moment, every mistake, every fear, because it all led me to you and to this life." "So would I," Knox agreed, 1,000 times over. They remained in the garden until the stars came out, holding each other and talking about everything and nothing. Their children's futures. Plans for expanding the ranch. Memories of moments they had shared. Dreams they still wanted to pursue together. The years that followed were gentle ones. Knox began to slow down, letting Henry take on more of the day-to-day management of the ranch while he focused on the parts he loved most. Helena continued her work helping women in labor, and she started a small school on the ranch property, teaching the children of ranch hands and neighbors. They became grandparents when Henry's wife gave birth to a daughter they named Helen, after both grandmothers. Knox cried when he held his granddaughter for the first time, overwhelmed by the continuation of the family he and Helena had created. More grandchildren followed over the years. Young Hannah married a kind banker from Denver and had 3 children. Samuel completed medical school and opened a practice in Montrose, marrying a nurse and having 2 children of his own. Even Emily eventually settled down, marrying a horse trainer and having a set of twins that kept everyone on their toes. Knox and Helena moved into a smaller house on the property when Henry and his growing family needed more space in the main house. The new house was cozy and comfortable, with a view of the mountains and enough land for Helena to maintain a smaller version of her beloved garden. On the evening of their 25th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the main house, their voices and laughter echoing through rooms that had once been quiet. Knox and Helena sat in places of honor at the head of the table, watching their descendants with pride and joy. After dinner, Henry stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to my parents. Ma and Pa, you showed all of us what it means to build a life together. You taught us about hard work and dedication, about weathering storms and celebrating victories. But most importantly, you taught us about love, real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters. Thank you for everything you have given us." Everyone raised their glasses, and Knox felt tears stream down his face. He looked at Helena and saw that she was crying too, her face radiant with happiness. "I love you," he mouthed to her across the table. "I love you too," she mouthed back. Later that night, when all the guests had departed and they were alone in their small house, Knox and Helena sat together on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air. "Can you believe it has been 25 years?" Helena asked, her head resting on Knox's shoulder. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime," Knox said, "and sometimes it feels like no time at all." "I am so grateful for every moment," Helena said, "even the hard ones, especially the hard ones because they taught us how strong we could be together." Knox kissed the top of her head. "When you stepped off that train wearing that veil, I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought I was getting a mail-order bride, a practical arrangement. Instead, I got the love of my life. And I thought I was running away from my problems," Helena said. "Hiding behind a false name and a veil. But instead, I was running toward everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a partner who sees me for who I really am and loves me anyway." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Finally, Knox said, "Do you ever think about that day in the garden, when you told me the truth and I told you to keep the veil on if you wanted?" "All the time," Helena admitted. "Those words changed everything for me. They showed me that you cared about what was inside, not just what was on the surface. They gave me the courage to be myself, to stop hiding." "I meant every word," Knox said. "Then and now. I married your heart, Helena, your beautiful, brave, generous heart. Everything else was just a bonus." Helena turned to kiss him, and even after 25 years, Knox felt the same flutter in his chest that he had felt the first time their lips met. Some things never changed. Some things got better with time. The years continued to pass, marked now by the seasons and the visits from their children and grandchildren. Knox's hair turned completely gray, and his movements became slower, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Helena never wavered. Helena developed arthritis in her hands, making gardening more difficult, but she adapted, finding new ways to nurture the plants she loved. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. They buried old friends and made new ones. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own, extending the family tree in directions they never could have imagined. On a crisp October morning in 1912, Knox woke to find Helena still asleep beside him, her face peaceful in the early light. He studied her features, memorizing every line and wrinkle, every strand of gray hair. She was 70 years old now, and he was 79, but when he looked at her, He still saw the woman who had stood in his garden 30 years ago and told him the truth about who she was. Helena's eyes fluttered open and she smiled when she saw him watching her. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning," Knox said, reaching over to take her hand. "Did you sleep well?" "I dreamed about our wedding day," Helena said. "About standing before the preacher in my veil, so frightened and uncertain. And then I heard you say those words. I fell in love with her heart, not her appearance. It still makes me cry, even in dreams." Knox squeezed her hand gently. "It was the truth then, and it is still the truth now." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Mitchell." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Helena replied. "Even when I thought I was just surviving, just finding a way to keep going, I was actually finding my way home. To you, to this life, to everything we built together." They rose together and went about their morning routine, moving slowly but companionably. Knox made coffee while Helena prepared breakfast, and they ate together at the small table in their kitchen, talking about their plans for the day. That afternoon, their oldest son Henry came to visit with his wife and their daughter Helen, who was now a young woman of 19. They sat on the porch together, 4 generations of Mitchells, and talked about the ranch and the family and the changes coming to the world. "Automobiles are becoming more common," Henry said. "I am thinking about buying one for the ranch. It would make trips to town much easier." Knox shook his head in wonder. "When I first came to Colorado, we had nothing but horses and wagons. Now there are automobiles and aeroplanes and talking on telephones. The world is changing so fast." "Some things never change," Helena said, looking at Knox with love in her eyes. "The important things stay the same." Helen, their granddaughter, spoke up shyly. "Grandma, I wanted to ask you something. I am engaged to be married, and I wondered if you might share some advice. How did you know Grandpa was the right one? How did you build a marriage that has lasted so long?" Helena and Knox exchanged glances, and then Helena said, "I will tell you the truth, dear one. I did not know your grandfather was the right one when I married him. I married him out of desperation, out of a need for security and safety. But I chose to stay with him every day after that. I chose to be honest with him. I chose to trust him. And he chose the same things. That is the secret, Helen. Marriage is not about finding the right person. It is about choosing to be the right person for each other, day after day, year after year." Knox added, "And it is about looking past the surface to what lies beneath. Your grandmother came to me hiding who she really was, but I learned to see past that. I learned to love the woman she was inside, not just the face she showed the world. And she learned to love me despite my flaws and failings. We learned to forgive each other, to support each other, to be partners in every sense of the word." Helen nodded thoughtfully, absorbing their words. "Thank you. I hope I can build something as beautiful as what you have." "You can," Helena assured her, "if you are willing to do the work, if you are willing to be honest and vulnerable and brave. Love is not easy, but it is worth every bit of effort you put into it." As the sun set that evening and their visitors departed, Knox and Helena returned to their porch, their favorite place to watch the day end. The mountains were painted in shades of purple and gold, and the first stars were beginning to appear. "We have had a good life," Knox said quietly. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "We have," Helena agreed, "and I am grateful for every moment of it. Every joy and every sorrow, every triumph and every struggle, it all mattered. It all brought us here." Knox pulled her close, and they sat together as the darkness gathered around them. Two people who had found each other through unusual circumstances, but who had built something real and lasting through their choices. The veil that Helena had worn on their wedding day was long gone, packed away and forgotten in a trunk somewhere. But the lesson it had taught them remained. That true love sees beyond the surface, beyond the masks we wear, to the heart of who we really are. And when two hearts recognize each other, when they choose to join together, despite fear and uncertainty, they can create something stronger than either could build alone. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night wind whispered through the sage, Knox and Helena Mitchell sat together in the quiet contentment of a love that had weathered 30 years and emerged stronger than ever. They had started with deception and fear, with veils and false names, but they had found their way to truth and trust, and a love that would last all the days of their lives. And that, they both knew, was the greatest gift they had ever been given. Not the ranch or the children or the material success, but the simple, profound gift of being truly known and truly loved by another person. "Thank you," Helena whispered as the darkness deepened around them. "For what?" Knox asked. "For seeing me, for loving me, for giving me a home and a family and a life I never dreamed I could have." "Thank you," Knox replied, "for having the courage to step off that train, for trusting me with the truth, for choosing to stay, for making every day of the past 30 years worth living." They remained on the porch until the cold drove them inside, and then they retired to their bed, holding each other close as they had every night for 3 decades. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the past and content with the present, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. And in the morning, they woke to another day in the life they had built together. A life born from a veiled bride and a cowboy who had the wisdom to love a heart rather than a face, and the courage to keep choosing that love every single day.